Would the clerk make the roll call?
Councilman Ziprick,
Present.
Councilman Peterson,
Present.
Mayor Protemporary Rigsby,
Here.
Mayor Brower, and Councilman Popescu are absent. We have a quorum.
Are there any items to be added or deleted?
There are none.
Okay, this is the time for oral reports, participation from the public on items that are not on the agenda. Does anyone seek to come forward to speak on any items not on the agenda? Seeing none, I believe we've handled our conflicts of interest by the absence of the two conflicted parties. Item number 1, public hearing, to be continued to April 14. Does that require a vote to continue it, or is it just automatic?
I was trying to determine whether that was noticed as a public hearing, but usually a motion would be appropriate.
To be on the safe side, I'll make the motion to continue it.
Okay. Do we need to open the public hearing and then close it if it was noticed?
If there's anybody here, you could inquire. And
Okay, is there anyone here who wanted to talk on item number 1 pertaining to fire department plan check fees for vegetation management plan? Don't see anyone, so that was a public hearing of sorts.
well, not per se, but you would give the opportunity if somebody were here due to the notice and could not be here at the next meeting.
So anyone who wishes to speak on that item can speak now or wait until April 14. Okay, seeing nobody. Let's move on to old business item number 2, Stewart Street project. By way of explanation for those who have not understood this before, the 3 councilmen before you are constituting a quorum for this because 4 of us had a conflict of interest regarding the university. We had drawing of straws. 2 members, Councilman Peterson and I, were selected to serve on this panel, and the others were not, and they're therefore absent today. So their absence is not an indication of their lack of interest in the subject. It's just an indication that they had a conflict of interest that was not resolved by a drawing of straws, and therefore, if they even showed up, they'd be in the back room the whole time. So we're proceeding without them. Item 2A is Councilman Ziprick.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor Pro Tem. The purpose of 2A is really to look at whether a matter should go on the ballot to allow the city to expend $2 million of RDA funds for the Stewart Street project and determine the consistency and compliance with Measure V. One of the things in conferring with legal experts such as the city attorney and doing some studying on my own is that it may hinge more on whether this is a public versus private project first. And where I was going with that to my colleagues and those listening is that if it appeared that this was a private project and the city was considering putting money into a private project, and if it appeared to be in violation of Measure V, I would be open, but not pressing, because I don't want the people who are proponents of Measure V to feel that this is an effort to grab control and amend Measure V. But if there was support from, say, yourself, Mr. Chair, and Mr. Popescu and others on the council to at least look at loosening Measure V in this one regard, I'm certainly willing to have a discussion on that. But I don't want to come on pressing for that, and it may be that that is not necessary to resolve this issue. If it's a private issue and we want to put money into it, I think there's some facts that may come out that may be important in that regard. If it's a public project, then it may not be a matter of concern because the public would be putting money into a public project. So maybe this should go to the very end of our discussion and see what we resolve in the other areas.
Okay, so you're proposing that we not discuss it now?
And maybe at the end, if in the wisdom of yourself and Councilmember Peterson, it seems like it's a good idea to look at some amendment of Measure V. I am not here to campaign tonight for an amendment to Measure V, simply to open up the option if it seems wise to look at that. So it could be put off until later, to see if we even need to consider it.
Okay, then perhaps do you have any comments, Belay? Okay. Perhaps we should discuss the topic at hand and go to item B, approval of mitigated negative declaration, and community development has a report.
Well, she's not here tonight, but I was there. So the staff prepared the mitigation negative declaration for this project, and it was presented to the Planning Commission on March 4th of this year. And the Planning Commission recommended that the City Council approve and adopt the mitigated negative declaration for this project. That's in the report.
Okay, any comments from council?
Mr. Chair, I was advised by a colleague, Mr. Ken Breyer, that some dignitaries from the university cannot be here for a little while, and that it might be appropriate to allow some time for them to get here. I don't know what the pleasure of the rest of the panel here is, but I don't know if on the timing.
You don't know how much time you need?
I want to be respectful of the process, and because they're obviously very interested in this matter.
Our CFO, Kevin Lang, is here, so maybe we want to go ahead. Dr. Hart and Verlin will be here they're supposed to be landing right now. So.
Okay.
Ontario, yeah. Yes, sir.
It's not San Bernardino International.
It would be handy.
I would like to see them here. I think it's important that they are.
I think this is a project near and dear to many people in the community who are involved in the institutions in particular. The issues are important, weighty issues, and out of respect for them, I know some of us had a chance to meet with Dr. Hart and Dr. Lang last Friday, and we want to be respectful of that because I think people would like a chance to dialogue on some of these issues. Is that fair, Kevin? If people want to go home, it's okay. But
I would
parties
appreciate
stay.
if we could hold it until Dr. Hart got here. So,
And if we start talking now, we'll say things and get some of the record established, and then they won't be here. They won't get to hear the whole discussion. Is that fair to make that point?
yes.
Well,
I don't know if you're.
Is item C in the same category? Okay.
Is there anything you could do to do a poll of how many people are wearing green in the audience? As the chair, you have some power in that.
Anyone in
regard.
orange?
Well, if you want to take a little time, I have a Jeopardy question. Who was the first president born in a hospital?
This needs to be thrown out to the audience. The studio audience has a right to take part in this.
Who was the first U.S. president to be born in a hospital?
Is this on Channel 3?
Yes, it is. And as a matter of fact, I think the prudent thing to do would be call a recess.
Because people are going to say this is a talk show.
Are we paying for the time on Channel 3? We can't just fill it with blather, which is what politicians do 100% of the time anyway.
I think you might lose some of your audience real quick.
Mr. Chair, I'm sure you would not be issuing blather.
Self-declared blather. Go ahead.
One comment I would make on item B, that's the consideration of the approval of the negative declaration. You could certainly discuss that and take action to adopt the mitigated negative declaration. That doesn't require that you go forward with the project. Obviously, it simply takes care of the environmental determination that then allows you to decide the ultimate question. If you recall, when this project has come before you on various occasions in the budget process and so forth, we were not in a position to take any final action or make any commitment on the part of the city to this project because the environmental determination has not yet been completed. So it is before you tonight. You could complete that part of the process without any prejudice to the ultimate policy decision to go forward or not.
Mr. Chair, I'd like to respond to just one thing, and I wish Dr. Hart were here, but he will be here later. One of the points I want to be very careful on is when we take actions, I think one of the things that our friends in the university have said over and over to me in the last couple of weeks is, as we have put funds aside for doing a project potentially like this, to them it's been an indication of a yes vote on the ultimate project. And if one votes yes on this, will it send a signal, yes, this is another yes vote, we should be spending money in anticipation that it's going to be approved. And people who understand, how the government works understand there's a final vote that has to consider it. I just want to be very, very careful not to have anybody say there's a misleading here or something like that, just by the process of doing routine actions that are part of a process.
Well, and one other consideration, if you were to reach a consensus not to go forward with the project, then you don't need to take any action on item B. The environmental determination is moot at that point. So, but if you wanted to get that out of the way, you could without any commitment to going forward with the project. But I recognizing your concern there.
Well, the point's been made to me, because I know earlier when funds were set aside in the RDA budget, that some people took that as a signal that we have a yes vote basically committed on the main project, even though I know statements were made by yourself and I know myself saying this is not approving the project. And so my question is, by taking B up, does that send the same signal? We are going ahead and moving forward, and how come you guys are not yes if you don't vote yes? And frankly, on that part, Dr. Hart's not here yet, and so one of the issues I have is I don't want to send mixed signals to people, because that's one point that I know I've wanted to be very careful on. I know there's technicalities, but I'm thinking maybe we ought to wait on that until we get done with the main issue.
One other aspect to that, just while we're chatting about it, the negative declaration, the approval of the CEQA document is required before you take any final action to go forward with the project. Item C is not necessarily final approval of the project either. At some point, there would still need to be a contract between the agency, the city, and the university for this project to go forward. So that might be the final step in that process that you discussed. There are various steps, and even tonight would not be the final action because we don't have a contract before us between the university and the city.
I guess the question is, and maybe we should discuss this when other people are here, but I'll throw it on the table. When do you discuss the final contract and the actual concept itself? Because at some point, I've watched in other governmental bodies where I know one project that was done some years ago by the county, and it slid forward, project milepost by milepost, and I went through the record and never really found a very determinative vote when the project was eventually approved. It just sort of happened. And there was a point where they said, well, we've gone so far now that we're into it. So the question is, when do you have on the agenda yay or nay on the project itself? Because some people are going to say you shouldn't be approving money for a management service if you're not going to do the contract. Does that become the point where you debate the contract itself?
That's a good time. We discussed this, I think, at a previous meeting where Jarb indicated that the management contract could be terminated at any time, but that some of the input from this contract would be useful in finalizing plans and reaching a point where an ultimate decision could be made. So again, there are various steps along the process. It's a little bit unusual for one public works project to be presented in this fashion without being part of the normal capital improvement program and so forth, which you tend to approve all at once. And then the actual construction contracts are approved as they come forward on an individual basis after bidding and so forth. But there's a lot to be done after tonight. Even if you decide to go forward, the project would have to go out to bid after the plans are completed, and then you'd have to award the contracts in that at some point.
Procedurally, one of the questions I would have, and there's parts of this that ought to wait till everybody's here, but if one had points that one wanted to see in a contract that aren't agreed upon, how do you get to those points? Do you debate it here? Do you debate it in a closed-door session? If it involves transactional issues you might like to see in the contract?
Well, if it involves a contract with a third party, typically there would be some negotiating by a designated representative of the city, usually the city manager or his representative, and then the contract would come back to the council for approval.
Let me throw one thing out that I know will be very early in the discussion tonight, and it is that there is perhaps a difference of opinion whether this is a private project or whether it is a public project. And many things flow from that discussion. And it's a decision that may set some precedents for some future projects. So I think time has to be taken to weigh it and come up to how you approach things like this, because there may be a consensus on the council that a project like this would be fine to be built depending on who's paying for it, or how you fund it, how you finance it, how you structure it. But I'm not sure how we get to those points, because there's a whole lot of things that could occur, and you never quite get to the ultimate issue of whose project this is. And that preliminary issue could be very important in deciding where you go down the line, who is responsible for what.
Question.
Go ahead.
As most of you know, I, as part of my work at the university, I've been director of a consulting group that consults on research projects both inside and outside the university. And every year we do projects for the state of California on their 5-a-day nutrition campaign. And the state of California will call us up and they will say, we have this other project to do here. Are you going to be able to do it for us this year? And we'll say yes. And they'll say, well, how much is it going to cost? And we'll send them an estimate of how much it's going to cost. Before we begin that project, I am required by the university and the state of California, but certainly by the university, to have drafted a detailed, many-page legal document to do a $3,000 project. And I cannot do that project until that legal document is signed by both parties and everybody understands in detail what every element is going to happen, who's going to do what, all the deliverables and everything else for a $3,000 project. How is it that we can start a $7 million project and not know what the details are? This is ludicrous. Unless we know the details, and I'm telling you, there is nothing, and you've observed it and I have, there is nothing that will tear a family apart as fast as commitments, gentlemen commitments and handshaking on who's going to owe what and who's going to borrow money to who and how it's going to be repaid. There is nothing that will tear a family apart faster than not understanding and all the misunderstandings that can go along with that. This is a family situation. And unless we have a detailed document that clearly spells out exactly what everything is going to do and going to happen, with no misunderstandings, we're in big trouble. And we're in big trouble already because of that.
Is that not something that item C would have given us information on if we had passed it when it first came up?
Mr. Chair, if you get into a contract for $300,000, it's significant enough that some people are going to say, you're already committed to the main contract without ever having really discussed the merits of it.
But does it not answer Floyd's question, give details? Because my understanding of the management contract is that it helps prepare the final plans and prepare more firm cost estimates and other things. So that's kind of what that's for. And preparing that it's a bigger project than a statistical analysis.
But is there not a fundamental issue as to whether this is a private contract or a public contract?
I think all of those arguments I'm going to concede those arguments. I'm just saying that I'm responding to Floyd's concern. His concern is we don't know what we're doing, and the point is that we needed to hire a construction management service to know what we're doing. That's my take on it.
Actually, the major deal, this construction management service organization, I believe, would be carrying out instructions of council. If you plunge into a $325,000 construction management service contract before you know the main deal points, you've gotten down to the twigs and the leaves of a contract before you have the main trunk established.
But that may be true, but it's still, you're not answering Floyd's question. Floyd's question, from what I could tell, is why don't we know what we're doing? Because we haven't taken the step to know what we're doing yet. And that's item C, but that's just my perspective, take it for what it's worth.
Would you make the argument if one had a management services contract that we're now committed to the main contract and there's no point in discussing the main deal points?
Well, you could make the same argument from last, let's see, a year and a half ago, a commitment of $2 million, and 4 months ago, a commitment of $1.5 million. You could make the same argument. I don't know that adopting a mitigated negative declaration would convince people laboring under the misapprehension that you're opposing or supporting this project. I don't think it would convince them otherwise. I don't know. To me, that we're all just, we're blathering.
Well, actually, it's a $7 million word blather, which is not a small item. And obviously, part of the privilege you have of chairing the meeting is to help organize the discussion, to make sure we don't do that.
Well, since we're prepared to call a recess, I don't think it matters, but we have an impending comment.
Well, just to let you know, they'll be here in 20 minutes. So
Okay.
they're on the freeway driving. So
Terrific.
Okay. So is it the pleasure of the council to have a 20-minute recess or more discussion?
I think we got to take a 20-minute recess.
The city attorney, the city manager votes for blather.
One thing I would point out, Mr. Chair, is actually a rather dangerous comment for the chair to go too far down the path of saying that a debate on something like $7 million is blather. That might suggest this is a futile discussion, and I don't think you mean it that way. But
No, I'm being somewhat tongue-in-cheek.
I know, but people watching take this seriously, and when you have that much involved, the issues here are very serious, obviously, to the city and the university, and you want to find a way, as our colleague has said, to work this out in the family, within the community. And so it may take some discussion to understand what the different perspectives are, and I wouldn't want to cut off discussion by having somebody in the audience feel like if they get up and make a comment. One very wise lawyer who I clerked for many decades ago told me that don't be afraid to ask stupid questions. That's one of the most key things in negotiations, because everybody may think everybody knows the answer and they're going to look stupid. The problem is that may be the most important question of the session. So I just don't want people to get the impression that if they ask something that may seem trite to somebody else, it may not be trite at all. It may be something that they're seeing that we're not. Is that fair?
Of course it's fair. I was just trying to provide.
You were being humorous.
Well, yeah, but that's with a blather comment. But yeah, I think most people would agree that's what politicians do. But I'm just admitting one of my weaknesses by saying that.
I think you're very serious-minded, and I'm glad you're chairing it, and I think we'll have a good discussion when everybody's here. So
Yeah.
I support the recess.
Okay. Looks like we only need 17 minutes, but we'll take 20. Recess for 20 minutes.